Hello guys, today welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'll be talking about something that is very crucial for developers, and especially if you are interested in data science, this is very important to you. So we'll be talking about virtual environments in Python. First of all, what we need to know is what exactly is a virtual environment, and more importantly, why do we use it? So virtual environments can be thought of as sandboxes. So what happens is, so whatever you do in sandboxes, whatever you want to create or whatever you are doing with the sand in the box, it doesn't affect the surroundings, right? So this is the same concept with virtual environments as well. So similarly, when say for example, you're working on a certain project, so you can install your package inside a virtual environment, and what it does is when you want to go to the next project, you can simply create another virtual environment and install the packages that you need for that next project without worrying that whether those next packages will break the packages in the previous one. So what happens, especially in the case of data science, so this is a very growing field, right? Even you could say it for data science or even web application, mobile application, any field which is very nascent, which is growing. You have packages with a lot of versions. So the latest builds are released like every few months or so. So for a single package, you would find a lot of versions, and maybe your project, whatever you are working on, requires just a specific version of that package. What happens is if you just install it directly into your global environment or global system, what happens is, say for example, whenever you are moving on to your next project, then it might affect because the next project might not require that specific version. Instead, it might require some other version to work with. So this is a conflict which usually developers have to face a lot. So that's why you do create a virtual environment. It's like a sandbox, as I say. You create a virtual environment. You do everything you want for a certain project in that virtual environment only, and then when you want to go to the next project, you just simply create another virtual environment. So next thing is, how do you create a virtual environment? So we will basically focus creating virtual environment in Python, and there are basically two ways of creating virtual environment in Python. The first is to use pip and virtualenv. So pip is basically a package installer for Python, which usually comes by default, or you can externally install it as well. And Conda or Anaconda is kind of you can think it as a kind of a distribution for Python and R, mainly for scientific computing, machine learning, data science, this kind of work. So the aim of Anaconda is to basically simplify package management and deployment. So you can very easily install packages, manage packages, and so on. So I will basically show you how to create a virtual environment in both these ways, and I will just talk a little bit about what's the difference between these two as well. So let's actually go to the terminal. Uh, this is my CMD. First, let us do one thing: change the drive. Okay. Now, for the first one, through virtualenv. So what happens? So basically, in my system, if I just write down Python version, you would see Python 3.8.5. And also, as you can understand, this is a Windows system. The process is pretty similar in Mac OS or Linux as well, but I will just point out the difference, like where exactly there might be some differences. So as you can see, usually now in the newer machines, Python is already installed. If you have Mac OS or Linux, Python is already installed. And if you are working in Windows, even if Python is not installed, you can very easily install it. It's open source. So once you install, and most of the new people are working with Python 3. So I will mostly be speaking about Python 3 plus versions. So in that, it already comes with pip and virtualenv. So virtualenv is basically a Python library to create virtual environments. If you're still using Python 2 versions like Python 2.7 or so forth, so the exact library is called virtualenv. Whereas if you are working with Python 3, like my system here, what we will be working with is venv. Okay, so why I show you the Python version is like there are a lot of differences between Python 3 and Python 2. Python 2 commands and Python 2 distributions are being deprecated like every month or so. So it's actually better to actually move on to the Python 3 versions. So let's basically, so as I said, so if you want to create a virtual environment through pip and virtualenv or venv, the command for that is python -m or -m venv. This is the command for the library venv, and the name of the environment that you want to give. Say for example, what I wanted to name it is like env. So this will be the command. The first is this Python. So if you have like multiple versions of Python, like Python 3 and Python 2, then you also have to mention Python 3 or Python 2 here. Since I only have Python 3, so I can just write Python and it will automatically detect Python 3. Then -m venv for the library and the name of the environment. So I can give it any name. So this is, I can just give it like test or something. And then if I enter, you would see that a new environment is basically produced. So in this place, you could also give a relative location as well, relative path as well. Say for example, right now, if I actually go to D drive, I would see this test environment. Now, just creating an environment is not the only thing. You also have to activate the environment to work in it. So what we need to do is to activate the environment in Windows, you have to write. So basically, you have to go inside this test folder that we just made, this environment. So I will write test, and then inside it, you would find a folder called scripts. So I will say, let me type out test scripts, and then inside scripts there's a uh, file called activate. And if I now press enter, you would see that now there's a sign. So before the prompt, there's test which is coming inside the parenthesis. So this is how we understand that, okay, whether an environment is activated or not. So initially you have seen that there's only prompt and the location where we are. Now it's not only the location, but before this prompt, there's also the name of the environment. So whatever name you gave to this environment, it will come over here. And now you can install anything. You can install using pip, or if you are using conda, you can install packages using conda as well. We'll talk about that later. So now whatever you are doing inside this environment, so until and unless you can see this thing before this prompt, that means that it's activated. Whatever you do, and when you leave this environment, that still stays in this environment, so it doesn't affect your system globally. Whatever you are doing inside your environment doesn't affect your system globally. All things will be happen inside this. So especially, as I said, so especially it affects the data scientist. So whenever you use a package which has, say for example, multiple versions, and you are specifically want a certain version for a certain project, you start that project, you activate, you basically create an environment, you activate the environment, and then you install that specific package into this environment. And when you go out of that environment, you can again use whatever version you want. It will not be affected. Okay, and deactivating this environment is very easy. Just write the command deactivate, and voila. So this is the first way of creating environment, a virtual environment. The other way I talked about is using conda. So as I said, conda itself, if you have used conda for data science or any scientific computing, so conda is basically as I said, it's kind of a distribution. So it itself is basically produces an environment. So if I just write conda activate and press enter, you'd see there's something called base. It's very similar to what we have seen earlier, and this is basically inside the parentheses, and then the prompt comes. So if you actually activate conda, it means that you are activating the base environment. Let me go out of it. So again, with conda, the command for deactivating an environment is conda deactivate. We are going in reverse, but yeah, let's and to create an environment, if you want to create an environment, new environment in conda, the command that you have to use is conda create handle called name dash dash name, and then actually the name of the environment that you want to give, say for example test. And now if you press enter, conda will basically see whether the dependencies and all are already satisfied and things like that, and then it will give you like whether you want to proceed with that, and it will also give you where exactly the environment will reside, the location of the environment. As you can see, it's inside in anaconda and a folder called envs. So all the environments that I'm creating in conda, by default they go under a folder called envs. Obviously, again, like previous, you can mention a relative path, and then the environment will be created in that specific path. So I will just proceed with no, but if you just press Y and click, it will create a new environment for you. Okay. So one thing before I will go is that what's the difference between these two environments, so you understand what's the importance of virtual environment. So every time we as a data scientist or even web developers, they use Python, they basically whenever they start a project, the pipeline is like this. So they create a new virtual environment, because whatever they are doing in that certain project should not ever affect the system, the global system, whatever configuration you have for your system. So as you see, there are two ways of doing it, right? So what's the basic difference? Both have actually very good benefits of using. In Python, in virtualenv basically gives you kind of the default Python version of virtual environment. So peep, as I said, peep is the basic package installer for Python. So usually when whatever package you use, usually they are in the PyPy project, and you can install it using pip, right? You can just have pip install this project, and that particular library is installed. Now what happens, especially in data science, is sometimes if say for example you are trying to install a certain library or package, and that package is dependent on some other packages as well, which we call dependencies. If you try to do that with pip, say for example I try to install package A, so I write pip install A. So pip will try to install A, and whenever it sees okay, A is also dependent on package B and C, it will also install B and C. What happens is like again there are several versions of A, B, C's, right? So as I said, latest builds are released every month or so, sometimes even in weeks. So there are multiple versions of ABC. If you are trying to install using pip, and if you don't specify the version that you're trying to install, pip will always install the latest build. So it will install the latest version of A, it will install the latest version of B, and it will install the latest version of C. Now, what really bugs me and what really happens sometimes is like all the latest versions are not compatible with each other. So the version of A that is being installed, the latest version, might be dependent on a earlier version of B and an earlier version of C. So this is what makes it very complex, is that you don't always know what's the exact version compatibilities, and so using pip might be a bit complex, especially if you're doing it in data science projects, because sometimes you need very specific versions to actually run the scripts and all. Whereas, just if we go completely towards the other way of creating environments or managing environments, if you install packages through Conda, Conda basically takes care of these version compatibility issues. So let's say if you basically if you again do try to do the same thing, you want to install package A, which is dependent on B and C. You try to install it like conda install A, and conda will actually see, okay, for the version for the package A, whatever version I'm trying to install, what are the compatible versions for B and C, and it will install only those packages, which is very good. Like if you know the exact versions, you can do it from pip as well, but that's basically you have to keep that in mind as well. But conda basically takes care of that issue. So it seems like conda is better, right? Not right, completely. Because what, and there's another thing, another aspect to it. What happens sometime is, say for example, conda was trying to install some package and it didn't find the perfect dependency for it. It has some dependency, but it is not in its database. What happens is conda sometimes bring the dependencies from the base environment there. You have seen, right, that if you just go with the conda installation that you have in your system, it activates the base environment. So if there's something in the base environment, and say for example you have already created an environment and you're trying to manage it, you're trying to install packages there, and for some package there might be just one package for which there was no dependency found. What it will do is sometimes take the package from its base virtual environment, and that again creates some issues later on, because like, it will change the base environment, right? So which basically defeats the purpose of actually creating a virtual environment, that it shouldn't affect the global system anyway. So this is one problem of conda that sometimes we face. Basically the bottom line is, if you are sure about which versions to use, always go for pip. If you are not sure about which versions to use, better to use conda. So these are the two ways you can create a virtual environment, and always try to do your projects in virtual environments. This is kind of a must do thing for every data scientist, even for web developers. Sometimes for web developers, if they're doing it in Node or something like that, it's already being taken care of. But if you are using Python for any project, whatever project you are starting, it's a very healthy habit to create a virtual environment and do everything in that virtual environment. So thank you guys. I hope you learned something. Please subscribe and let me know if you want to know something about a specific topic. Thank you very much.